You all know the deal. From the Middle is proud to be a founding member of the Odd Pods Media Network. Hey kids and AFOLs, that's adult fans of Lego. We are so glad you are with us. This is episode number 127 of From the Middle. From the Middle is a comedy, culture, entertainment, and interview style podcast. And this week, we are super excited to have Wes Talbot. Wes is an artist, illustrator, and design master at the Lego Group. We've mentioned Lego and our love of Lego multiple times on this podcast, and we are so glad that he's joining us to talk not only about what it's like to work for the Lego Group, but a little bit about his art, his illustration, and even his love of Dungeons and Dragons. So if you're joining us this week just to hear Wes, thank you for joining. We're glad to have you, but please do come back. We have a lot of fun discussions about the arts and entertainment, food, geek culture, being immature husbands and dads on this podcast. As you know, we are three middle-class guys living in the middle of America in the middle chapters of our lives with a point of view that's somewhere in the middle. Play that intro music, Kendall.
Oh, for the love.
Sorry, just clearing my Mountain Dew hole.
I got my phone hole cleaned today.
That's where you keep it? You're so cerebral and you're so developed and evolved.
Artists, geeks, lovers, and friends, welcome to episode 127. I am super excited to announce and introduce to you this week's guest. Wes Talbot is an artist, an illustrator, a Lego design master, and we are super excited to have him. Wes, I think how we first met, you're a CCAD guy, right? You went to Columbus College of Art and Design as well.
Yep.
And what year? Yeah, what year did you graduate?
It was 2013.
Okay, so a few years behind me, and
Yeah.
you had reached out to me actually because you were doing at the time some illustrations for a church in the Columbus area. It's a pretty cool thing, actually. They have their own little design studio. So if you don't know or didn't grow up in churches, like most Sunday school programs where they give kids Bible stories and coloring pages, most churches just reach out to some company that puts those together. But this church wanted to design their own. They sort of envisioned themselves as like a mini Disney. So they would write and create their own curriculum of these really cool, fully illustrated coloring books with fully illustrated covers. And Wes had been doing that right before you accepted the job to Lego. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. That was one of many like small freelance gigs that kind of pieced together.
Yeah. So you threw that my way. Thank you for that, by the way.
No problem.
So you went off to Lego and gave me your sloppy seconds. And I'm just kidding. And I got to do those books for a while, and that was really fun. And now you're just crushing it over at Lego. And I have to tell you before I let you talk, you are one of those artists that everything you post, I love. Whether you're doing cosplay for Halloween or for fun, or you're like, hey, I bought some clay and some leather and I'm making this really awesome Dungeons and Dragons book. And like everything you do, there's a few guys that I went to CCAD with that are the same way. Like, I know you know Brian Mattias, who's over at Lucasfilm now. Tyler Coey, Dylan Menges, some of those guys where it's like, no matter what they're doing, it's just cool. So you inspire me. I'm glad to have you on to talk about art and illustration and Dungeons and Dragons and Lego and all things. So thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So I guess just off the top, I don't even know if I know, because you're from Ohio, but Whereabouts in Ohio are you from?
So I grew up in Johnstown, Ohio.
Okay.
Which I guess everyone that lives in Ohio probably knows roughly where that might be, although maybe not. It's a small town. But yeah, lived there for 23 years or something like that in my life, and then moved straight to Denmark. So that was a big change.
Wow.
Yeah. I got a little bit of the city life in Columbus when I was going to CCAD. So that was kind of a nice transitional period, though.
Yeah. Are you the typical like CCAD student in that you were always drawing, your parents said you were really good, your art teachers sort of fostered and encouraged it? Like, do you have that typical how you knew you wanted to end up in some art field kind of story?
Kind of. It was painfully not that obvious, unfortunately. Like, so I was homeschooled, and my mom is also artistic, and my dad and my brother as well. So the whole family liked to draw to some extent. But when it came to like a career, it wasn't something that was really like encouraged until another kid at my church at the time, actually, who was a couple years ahead of me, which I don't know if you would have met him. His name was Josh. I'm trying to remember his last name. I can't remember.
Another illustration kid?
Yeah, he ended up going into fine art, I think.
Okay.
But I can't remember his last name. But anyway, he went to CSCD, and then his mom was talking to my mom about it, and I overheard them, and I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds good. And up until that point, I had like considered everything but art, like,
wow,
which is kind of weird because like I was drawing all the time, I just didn't put the dots together. So
that's fascinating. Yeah. And how about the Lego piece? Like, were you always playing with Lego?
Yeah, it's kind of the same. Like as a kid, from like, I don't know, 3 or 4 up until like middle teen years, I was building quite a bit. Eventually, I kind of lost interest, or I lost inspiration, I would say. Mm-hmm. And if I had known like about the fan community that's out there and all the other cool stuff you could do, I feel like I probably wouldn't have fallen out of it. But yeah, that's another one that I never even considered. Like as a kid, you're like, oh, I would love to work for Lego. And as a kid, you have that naivety of like, I could do this. And then you grow on to be a teenager, and then you don't even think, oh yeah, that is an actual job that I could do. So,
well, that's what I was thinking. So growing up with a brother who's an artist, I've heard so many boring stories about art, and nobody ever thought to mention that CCAD could have led to Lego. If that had been mentioned way earlier, I would have been far more interested. No, I'm kidding. You guys are incredibly talented, as are everybody at CCAD. But I don't think most people think art school designer at Lego. Like that's probably not a path that the average person thinks.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things where somebody will have that pie in the sky thought of I want to design Lego. That's what I want to do when they're a teenager, right? And then all the adults around them are like, okay, you need to learn how to weld. So why don't you draw that line from us? So you get it. You hear about CCAD through your mom's friend, and you walk that path. Take us down that road all the way to the opportunity of landing at Lego.
Yeah. Also, I remember the guy's name. It was Josh Culberson.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Anyway, so how did I get to Lego from CCD? So I studied illustration, and I actually, around when Lord of the Rings came out, the Lego Lord of the Rings sets, that's kind of what brought me back into Lego and being interested in it again. And then it kind of like, it was back on my radar, and then I remembered how awesome it was. I'm like, oh man, it would be great to do some freelance illustration for Lego. Because at the time I was also thinking in my box of, I'm a freelance illustrator. So I found, I was super active on DeviantArt at the time. And I found a guy who had done some like magazine covers for Lego. And so I DM'd him and said, hey, would you be willing to share your contacts? And he was super nice. His name was Jeremy Vickery. He was also, I think, a lighting director at Pixar for a while even. And then he ended up leaving Pixar later. Anyway, but yeah, he gave me some contacts, and I emailed them, and like, long story short, like sent them kind of a portfolio. And I also, from that point of when I thought, oh, that would be cool, I also started steering all of my courses, all of my assignments at CCAD towards Lego. So if I could at all make a Lego piece or an illustration or a poster of minifigures or whatever, I would do it. So I was able to fill out my portfolio, send it away. and I was super lucky that they were kind of looking for a concept artist for a new theme that would end up being Lego Elves, which was perfect for me because I was into fantasy illustration. So it was
Nice.
very I don't want to say lucky, planned out, awesome lining up of events that kind of led to it. I guess simultaneously to that, I also discovered the at the time Lego Kuso platform, which is now Lego Ideas, and thought it would be really fun to make a project for that. And that's also kind of what gave me that feeling of, oh, I could actually design the sets as well. Yeah. But it wasn't actually until I got there and I was doing illustration work for this new theme that I saw all the model builders and what they were doing. And then that's when it hit me. I was like, oh, wait, I could also do this. So it's funny how it's there's 3 different layers of me not considering doing art for the longest time. And then, oh yeah, of course. And then not considering Lego for the longest time. And then, oh yeah, of course. And then now model design is the last thing that I was like, yeah, why not?
That's cool.
Look, we went from Lego to Lord of the Rings, and this is quickly becoming one of my favorite episodes. It's like the Step Brothers, did we just become best friends thing? And it's funny, I'll have a question for you later, but the Lego things to Lord of the Rings to Elves to the blacksmith set that I'll ask about later, all of it's just making sense now as you're telling the story. So I'm loving it. This is great.
In the most recent season of Lego Masters on Fox, it's Fox, right? They were talking about how every young kid who builds with Lego goes through a dark period, or almost, it's common, I guess, that kids go through a dark period where they don't build for a while. And I wonder if the Lego movie and Lego Masters sort of made it okay for older kids and adults to play with Lego, like the rise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe made it cool for comic book geeks to admit their love of comics. Do you feel like that's true?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's also now how you're seeing the adults welcome marketing from Lego. We realize our product is great for kids, of course, and that's what we aim for all the time normally. But then as soon as we found that those kids that we aimed at before have grown up and still love it, we could actually bring them in and bring in new adults as well. So it's definitely become a much broader thing than just a toy. And we definitely try to encourage that as much as possible. I think that's what Lego Masters does so well. It's making it more about the creativity aspect of Lego rather than it's just a building toy, which is why, people like me fell in love with it in the first place.
By the way, I just got chills on your behalf that you can say we. You say we and you're talking about Lego, and I just got excited for you.
Yeah, and the adults welcome thing. So for anyone listening that's not huge into Lego, a quick example would be, you guys aren't building Lego Seinfeld sets for 6 to 12-year-olds,
No.
Right? So, it is sure if anybody wants an apartment, but Seinfeld, Friends, The Office just passed Lego Ideas, for the Office set, the Home Alone home mansion that just came out. This is clearly we know that there's fans that are older that love minifigs, that love these iconic nostalgic sets and are just waiting for them to get through the ideas phase. And what are some other popular, I know I'm missing stuff. What are some other of the most popular adults welcome Lego sets?
I think the NES that just came out not too long ago is a really big one. And I guess you could say other things like the modular series has always kind of been the main line that a lot of AFOLs, adult fans of Legos, as they're called, have always loved that modular series. And it used to be that was kind of the only major thing. And then I guess you could have architecture stuff, and there's a few small lines that would focus on more complex building and much bigger products. But now you see that's everywhere, in superheroes as well. Superheroes used to just be about a Spider-Man action-packed play set or whatever. And now you have like the Daily Bugle, which is this humongous skyscraper with like all of these characters from like corners of comics that kids probably haven't even seen yet. So yeah, it's definitely become infused in the entire brand at this point, that we are trying to like appeal to as many different ages as possible.
Yeah, even into like the paintings. So you've got like wasn't it the Beatles had their own pictures, and then the globe, and then you've got some of these the new flower sets that are all these different kinds of flowers that, you know, it's just wild. It's really fun stuff.
Yeah, it's fun to watch my my mother-in-law, who when we first met and she knew I was super into Lego, she was kind of like not so keen on it or not really interested, had never built a Lego set. She's like, okay, that's Wes's thing. And then just this past year, she came to visit for like 3 weeks, and I had a bunch of sets that I hadn't built yet. And we were going to work and stuff, so she needed something to do. And she just absolutely fell in love with the process of just building from instructions. Like I don't know, it's almost therapeutic for some people. And she doesn't even necessarily want to keep the models afterwards to have on display, but it's like doing a puzzle essentially. So I think a lot of adults, especially through COVID, are discovering that sort of feeling you can get from building a Lego set as well.
Yeah, my father-in-law has a red 47 Dodge truck, and I'm about this close to getting that red pickup truck set for him because it's so close. It's so close. I think you would like it.
So tell me more about, so you arrive at Lego and you start as an illustrator of the theme, not so much set builder. Like, it's one thing to be able to draw and paint. What was the transition like for you, or what was the learning curve like to think in terms of bricks and engineering and the math of Lego as opposed to just the aesthetics? And I'm bifurcating the two, but we know they're one and the same. But you have to think a little differently. You know, it's like additive sculpting in a way, as opposed to just, I can move this pencil around until this two-dimensional illustration looks the way that I want it to.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's a lot of different ways as well to build with Lego. Like sculpting is definitely an aspect of it. And then I'll maybe get into the details of model design later. But as far as like getting used to it, I think it really helped me that I did build with Lego so much as a kid. Like there are times where I would be building 8 hours a day because like I was just the type of kid that could just go down in the basement and fend for myself and just do that all day. Yeah. So it was interesting coming back and then getting used to all the pieces again, like remembering all the pieces, seeing like, okay, what entire new families have come in, like more curved shapes had come in. I'm like, oh, I don't know how, I haven't used these before. This is interesting. And then learning how those go. So that's kind of an exciting part of it. Like, it is obviously a system of bricks, and I think the exciting thing about it is how limited it is. And sometimes we do make a lot of new elements, but a lot of times it's like minifigure parts and stuff like that. But we try to keep like the core pieces as simple as possible, because that's what makes it like approachable in a way. Like, if you can tap into that system of shape, everything will work. Yeah. So I think there's definitely some getting used to it. Like, looking back at some of the first things I built are not the most impressive things in the world. And then there's also, like actual model design is like a very different thing as well, because you're having to think about making sure that the pieces are different enough that kids don't get confused. Like, the building experience on top of like what it looks like and how it's shaped up is also quite fun.
Yeah, I'm going to share one of your mocks, which is my own creation. And like, just to give you a sense of like the advanced level of stuff that Wes is building. If you're on YouTube, I'm sharing his dragon head bust. Like, aesthetically, this is amazing. The colors you're using, the way you're using the pieces on the outside is one thing. But all I'm thinking about when looking at this is what's going on underneath that to be able to support that stuff on the exterior. Because there are very few studs at play. It's a lot of nice flat stuff. And I'm like, what's going on under the dragon head that makes all that possible? And that's where I think the engineering and the knowledge of the pieces and doing studs not on top or snot if you're not familiar. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is kind of the perfect example of what I was talking about with like more sculpting with Lego bricks. Like if you look at the interior, this is going to be completely nuts compared to even a similar official Lego product, like maybe some of the helmets from Star Wars and like the Venom head from superheroes. Like it's a similar thing, but because this is a mock, like I didn't think at all about the interior or like how it needed to be structured. It was more like I just kind of start with a spot. So I think I started with the eye on this one because obviously that's the thing you kind of want to nail first on a face before you bother with the rest. So just figuring out like how do those pieces, and you don't even necessarily have to think about how they attach at first. You're just like, well, I know this piece is this shape and I know this piece is this shape. I want those two to be next to each other kind of at this angle. And then you have to kind of call back to your library of the pieces in your head and then think, okay, what do I actually need to put between those to make them connect at that spot? And then from there, just obviously he's symmetrical, so that's nice. And then you just kind of build the whole thing on both sides and make your way down the nose. And like how, like I might build like a bunch of basic bricks from the eye out to the roughly where the end of the snout would be. So in that sense, it's very similar to kind of when you're blocking something out in clay for a sculpture where you get the big basic shapes. But I guess in the difference, because it is more additive than it is reductive, like sculpting clay, it's more like you just have to kind of do a lot of filling in the blanks as you're going.
It's beautiful, man. And like your use of color here, by the way, like that's one thing that's consistent throughout, whether you're doing watercolor or like something on your iPad or even your Lego creations, like how you use color is one of the coolest things. I'm a fan, man. This is a love fest. I could just peruse your artwork all day long. So I'll let one of my co-hosts ask the question before I keep going.
So when you're doing something like that, or when you're designing anything at work, it sounds like there's so much fun for you and a work. Does it sometimes just feel like work to you? Like when you're thinking about what I'm equating to like a kind of a weird Lego specific editing process that includes making sure pieces are different enough and those kinds of things. Does that feel like that's kind of like bogging you down at all? Or is there enjoyment even in those processes?
I actually love that phase. So we have what we call, I don't know why we call it P phase, but it's like prototyping phase, I guess. Maybe that's what it stands for. There's P phase and M phase. And then M, I guess, is manufacturing or whatever. We don't think about it. There's a lot of like, as with any big company, a lot of like acronyms and stuff that you just don't even think about. But M phase is basically what you're talking about, where it's like a lot more analyzing every single piece you have in the set, like making sure like everything is on price for the budget that you've been given, like making sure we have like a set limit of like new colored elements or new decorations that we're allowed to have per set, or that's allotted to each set, and it's different for each one. So, and then there's also on top of that, like model quality meetings that we have. We normally have like 2 or maybe 3, where we meet with the person who's developing the building instructions, and also what we have as a model coach. So we have an entire department called model coaches who focus on making sure that everything is built in a legal way, like an approved connection point and stuff like that. But then also their job combined with building instructions is also to really help us make sure that it's like the correct building experience for the age mark. So like you can't do something wildly complex for a 5-year-old because they won't be able to do it. So there's all that stuff, and that's in M phase, and that's actually my favorite. It sounds like stressful, but it's actually, I find it almost more fun because it's like a really challenging puzzle. I love designing with limitations. So actually one of my favorite things to do is when you have a model that is a concept model and it looks really awesome and it's huge and it's actually like way overpriced. And you need to like find a way to shrink it down and like make sure that everything fits in the budget. And I always love that because I'm also a very, reductive design type of guy, like less is more mentality, keep it simple, all that good stuff. So as soon as you like trim all the nonsense out of a model and you get to the essence of it, I love that part, which is harder to do with giant models, like for the like complex stuff, because then you get a little bit more of that budget to make all the details really fleshed out.
So it sounds like so I've been into creative writing, and I remember in a class in college, the idea was crystal clear to me when I was told that thinking outside the box is good, but it also, what that means is that there is a box. And so creativity often has to come out when you're told, say the same thing, exactly the same idea, communicate that, but now we're going to give you these parameters, whether it's a particular rhythm or meter, or if you're writing a song and in a particular time signature, those kinds of things. Like we're going to put you into this box now say that thing again. I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about here. Like the creative process just gets another jump start when you're told, okay, now do this, but here's your new limitations.
And I think, Wes, I have an example, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry if you're just listening in your car and not on YouTube. But like, this is the blacksmith set that maybe you designed without limitations. And if I had unlimited pieces, this is how I would make it, versus like this was the released set, which is more considerate of budget and building ability, versus like if I was just doing this for myself, this is how I would do it. Does that illustrate the concept you're talking about?
Kind of. So that one is the fan built model. So on Ideas, that the blacksmith was pitched by another guy, Clemens Tyler. So he built this model, he put it on Ideas, it got to 10,000 supporters, and then that's when we made it into a product, and then I took over from where he started. So
got it.
In a sense, so it is similar in that he did the sketch model and then I finished it up. But yeah, things like the roof and like the amount of different shapes on there and like all the different angles that they're kind of tilted at, even though it is a product aimed towards adults, and then all of the same color on the same color would get very frustrating. Yeah. So that was like one of the first things when I saw this model and I knew I was going to be working on it. I was like, okay, I know people love that roof and they want that roof to be detailed. So how can I do it in a way that is like still detailed, but maybe a little bit more friendly to the builder?
Got it.
This is perfect because I wanted to ask about this one anyways. So tons of detail. I love the finished product here, and especially the inside, lots of cool details. What's the research process like for a set like this one? And is this one of like, what you can answer this is twofold. So what's one of the favorite sets you've ever researched? And then what's it like on something like this? Because there's a lot of little details. You can't just have a room with like a person in it and, a table. Like there's got to be a lot more detail that gets across. This is clearly a medieval blacksmith. If you're on YouTube, you're seeing all the detail shots. So can you dive into that part a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So for this particular model, obviously it's kind of in the realm of stuff I'm into. So I kind of had a built up knowledge of blacksmithing just from like going to Ren fairs and watching and like Boy Scout camp and stuff, where just watching people blacksmith quite a few times. So I had seen roughly what went into it. I never learned to do it myself, unfortunately. But I always start from fresh, even if I think I know what a blacksmith is, like I want to make sure I really know. So I normally just dive in, like, yeah, pretty much just go and start Googling away, like blacksmith, what would be a medieval blacksmith shop's workshop, and then try and get everything. And that's also where like fun ideas like the bellows comes in, where you have a bellows that pumps air into the forge. And I knew I wanted to have a light brick to light it up. And then it's like, oh, it makes sense to just plug that into the light brick so that you're pushing on the bellows to light it up. So it's things like that that are the fun ways of like, it's not always about being super realistic. Like it is fun to put in some details. But like, it's also about, there's some Lego humor to it as well. Like the Lego universe is very much like a translated version of the real world. It's not meant to be like 100% correct. So there's always these fun little stories that you can bring in that might not have otherwise been in a real medieval blacksmith. But to answer the other question about what's my favorite one I've ever researched, I think it's actually for the typewriter that I worked on, also through Lego Ideas, because that one I didn't know barely anything about typewriters. I think I had used one like once before, which is, I guess, rare for someone my age. But at least I had no idea how they worked. And we had a guy that lent us a couple copies. He collects Matt Boyle. He's in our brand department, and he collects typewriters. And he lent us a couple copies to look at to just see how everything functioned. And actually, this is another good example of that. What I was talking about, how that translation, because it's like we cannot like use Lego pieces to build a typewriter the way a typewriter is built, because you need like super thin steel structures and stuff in order to do that. So it's about that translation of like, how can we get the feeling of a typewriter the best we possibly can without having to make a billion new elements and completely different materials we don't even have.
That brings me to one of my questions. So is there like a brick library at headquarters with unlimited pieces and unlimited colors that you get to use at the offices or take home while you're researching how to do one of these sets? Or do you just have a crap ton of stuff at home that you can use? Because this is like the Willy Wonka kid in the candy store. Like, you're at headquarters and get unlimited bricks to use and play with. And then follow-up question, what is the criteria for selecting whether or not a set needs a piece that Lego has never made before? Like, it would really help 20 different sets if we had this type of piece, and then they go, all right, we'll go ahead and make that. Or are you you kind of mentioned it in your parameters that you're given? Is it like, really try to use stuff that we've already got, but if you can make a strong enough case, we'll make this piece that doesn't exist?
Yeah. So to your library question, yes, there's definitely, we call it the element stock. There's a size of about a basketball court.
Oh my gosh.
Just like shelves and shelves and shelves of bricks. And so there's that one, which is like all the pieces that kind of exist right now, because they're constantly in flux. Because obviously we can only have so much room in all of our factories to store like all the different shapes and all the different colors with all the different decorations and all that. So you might be, if you're like an AFOL that has an amazing collection at home, you might be a little bit disappointed because you'll show up and you're like, but where's this brick in this color? Like, so we don't have everything in every color by any means. It's only what is currently in production, essentially. But the really exciting one is there's the new stock, is what we call it. And that's where like all the new color changes, all the brand new elements. We have like all the test molds that are coming in. So like, that's part of my daily ritual, is me and a couple of my other guys in my carpool will come in, get a cup of coffee, head straight to new stock. And then they have these little bins. They have these bins that they put like whatever the new thing that just came in. And we're like, oh, it came in today. Because it might be like, you might have new color changes that you've been waiting on for your model, because you have to like spray paint them to make it look right. up until now, and now you have it in molded plastic, and that's always really exciting. Or just like to see, oh, what I didn't know this piece was coming. Like, how am I going to be able to use this, or stuff like that. But then, yeah, to lead into your other question about how do you choose to make a new element? There's a couple different reasons. Like, a lot of it is novelty driven. Like I said before, like a lot of like character based themes, like new IPs and stuff. We have to make a ton of wigs and gear and stuff like that for minifigs. But as far as building elements go, it's oftentimes based. It's also novelty. So like you might notice like Ninjago tends to make a lot of like big chunky sword elements and stuff like that then they can stick all over their cars and their motorcycles, and it has a really big impact on the tone of voice is what we call it of that year for Ninjago. But then we also have just building needs. Like actually a good example is the 1x1 brick with the cross axle hole through it, which I use like over 70 times, I think, in the typewriter. And if I didn't have that piece, we probably could have made a typewriter, but we couldn't have made it the way we did, and it would have been way more complicated because if we were stuck to a 1x2 brick, it's like twice as much brick with the connector that we need. So for making things in much tighter spaces, that's like a really strong need for that one. And then we also, to just keep using the typewriter as an example, like using the Porsche made the triple curve element for the wheel well, and they needed that to get probably to get the approval from the IP partner that it looks like the car. So there's a lot of IP driven ones. That's kind of goes into the novelty thing. But then now that it's in the system, it's like, oh, well, actually this is perfect because we don't have any big curved elements that would make the housing for all the hammers. So this new Porsche bow is perfect. So it's always nice. Like I think I'm always a little gutted whenever we make something that is that feels too special. Like it does happen sometimes through an IP or something. But I mean, it's part of what you need to portray each IP. But it's kind of funny because Minecraft actually is the project that makes the most specialized elements. Like a lot of, like it's a Minecraft sword or a Minecraft pickaxe that a minifig can hold. But then they also make the most useful pieces, like just building elements, because a lot of their sets are based on using really classic basic bricks, but just needing to do it in a different angle or something like that would really help them. So I think they made the 1x1 cross axle brick. They made the 1x5 plate is the latest big one that everyone's wild for. Yeah.
That's so crazy to me that a world made up entirely out of bricks requires the most unique pieces from Lego.
Bricks, yeah.
Yeah, well, and so for the average non-adult fan of Lego, like you can't make Star Wars set 7, 8, 9 without making a new First Order Stormtrooper helmet. Like you have to make that. It's an entirely new piece. But then to think about it like a different process for something that's going to be hidden that you won't even see, it makes sense that those are two entirely different approval processes, because you have to have a Stormtrooper helmet. I mean, you have to have the new one because you can't do Star Wars without it. That's a unique piece that makes total sense. But otherwise, there might be, how many times do you feel like you've gone to do something and needed a custom piece and then found other ways to do it because you had to? That was a piece you wouldn't even see.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would say most Lego designers work that way anyway. Like we don't usually depend on new pieces as much as we possibly can. So like the Porsche, I'm pretty sure we built a version that didn't use that new element because we always need to prove that it can't be done with existing pieces, and then you make the prototype of the new one. You're like, okay, yeah, that does make a huge impact. Yeah. So we should do that.
Yeah,
that's cool. Well, I promise we won't ask you only Lego questions. We want to hear about the other aspects of your life that you're into. But let's get in a word from one of our friends in the Odd Pods Media Network, and we'll be right back with design master Wes Talbot. Hey guys, before we go to break, you may have heard last week that one of my dear friends, Trent, was involved in a really bad motorcycle accident. He actually hit a deer going about 80 miles an hour on his KTM Super Duke. And Trent is owner of Backroom Coffee Roasters. If you've heard that name before, that's because early on in our podcast history, before we knew how sponsorships and any of that worked, Trent played ball and really worked with us and teamed with us and helping to promote his brand, as well as he helped us out as we were just kind of getting started. So it would mean a lot if you supported Trent and Backroom Coffee Roasters. Every little bit of coffee that you buy goes to help him pay for his medical bills, and he has a lot of them coming up. Their coffee is awesome, so this is a win-win across the board. So go to www.backroomcoffeeroasters.com. Check out all of their roasts. Biker Blend is by far their most popular, and they have a ton of good varieties that you can choose from. Fill your cart, and that would really mean a lot to us. So support Backroom Coffee Roasters. You can also follow them on Instagram at Backroom Coffee. Yeah, that's it.
I'm Rob.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Joe.
I love it.
I think it's kind of meh.
And I've never seen it.
We're keeping up with the Cardassians.
A podcast covering 7 seasons of Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
But that's not it. We go down the wormhole
Of pop culture, life, and Garrick.
New episodes every Monday.
On your favorite podcasting platforms. You can also interact with the show on Twitter at CardassiansPod.
And just like the Ferengi, we can't wait to stroke your lobes.
And we're back with Design Master Wes Talbot. So we talked earlier about how the Lego movie franchise and Lego Masters is really introducing people who didn't really understand all the fun ways you could use Lego, or even closeted Lego fans. It sort of like allowed them to admit their love of it. And one of my silly questions about Lego Masters is there a formula for making spheres and circles? Like you'll see in the show that they're going to make a planet or the ring around Saturn, and they make these perfect circles. And I wonder, is there like an algorithm for that? Or do they just like make a cardboard circle in the size that they need and then use bricks to get that perfect? Like I'm thinking of the Star Wars helmets as well. Like I have one on my desk of the TIE fighter pilot. And I'm like, how do they, or are they just so good that they know how to do it? Does the question make sense? Circles and spheres.
Yeah. Well, that's another aspect of Lego in general, is like math, which I am not good at.
Oh, that's why I don't know. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So there's the math designers, and then there's the other designers. And I work a lot with Mike Psyche. Well, I haven't worked in his project that much, but I'm constantly asking him. He's a designer in Creator Expert. He did like the Mustang, the Titanic that's coming out soon. What else? So a couple modular buildings and things like that. But he's like the math guy, and he normally deals in triangles more than spheres. So as far as like spheres go, there's a couple techniques. I think one, which I think actually originated from a fan. I don't know the guy's name. I think his name is Lowell something, or maybe it's his last name. But I just know they call it the Lowell sphere technique, which is basically like whenever you see like almost a perfect sphere that's made out of like, and you just see only studs. It's like studs all the way around. That's his technique, or at least he's the first one in the fan community to have done it. And that's what I've done before. We had we did like a collaboration with UNICEF, and their logo is like a blue soccer ball or something like that. So they wanted a Lego blue soccer ball. So I made an actual size, just blue sphere. And that's the one I looked up, and you can find guides online, I think, about like various people have figured it out. So you just can see how they did it. But there is some just kind of, what do you call, like I don't know, sculpting to it. Like once you do it, you start to realize how it's working.
Yeah.
Like for that one, you make it's like if you look at a volleyball and how it's made up of all these rectangular strips that are then interlaced. You basically just make those. So you make 6 times of these kind of band-aid shaped curved pieces, and then you make a cube that has studs on all sides, and
That's
then you
so
stick
crazy.
all the pieces on.
Well, you never
So
see
that's
that.
one way, yeah.
Yeah, you never see that on Lego Masters, right? But if they're making a ring around something in the show, they're just doing this perfect ring, and you're like, did they just have that in their head? Or
Yeah. I mean, another way to think about it is kind of like pixel art. Like, it's very much like that. It's the same with mosaics. Like, you can make an organic looking shape out of smaller, I guess in their case it's circles, but squares. Yeah.
So,
but there are more complex ways as well, like Technic paneling, like the Death Star model and stuff.
Yeah.
Or you have like a Technic frame and then you slap like angular plates on it. But I find that's definitely trickier, especially to get stable.
Yeah. That's so fascinating and fun.
Change of direction a little bit. We've talked about the Lego Ideas platform. Fans can submit their own creations. Lego can approve or decline. I don't know the nice way to say that, to produce something. And then typically it gets customized, based on all the things you've described. So piece count and cost and building techniques and stuff like that. Is there anything that hasn't made it through the ideas that I'm sure you guys keep an eye on some of those things? And if you're not allowed to speak to it, it's fine. But is there anything that didn't get through ideas that you're like, ooh, I really would have enjoyed working on that thing?
Yeah. I will say that, like, because none of this is for actual products, but the thing I like about ideas personally is like the original stuff. So like, because we have all these like partnerships with licenses and things on the side anyway. So I always appreciate it when a fan submits like their own idea, that it's not always like, it's cool to get those like TV show SKUs and stuff because you get to see your favorite characters as minifigs and stuff. But I always really love it when someone has a really original idea, and then we make that into a set, because it really feels like it's more than someone just suggesting, oh, what if you did this? Like, it's
right.
It's like, well, almost anyone could say, well, what if you did that IP? But not everyone can have the idea to make like a pop-up book or a typewriter out of Lego, like to use Lego in a way that you're not used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, as an example,
in that sense,
one of the more recent that got approved with The Office, I think, was the Jazz Quartet.
yes,
that was a very cool. I was blown away by the figures and the poses and the instruments. I don't know if we throw that up or if Corey can pull it up, but is that an example, an original, not something like Jurassic Park or Star Wars or?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess to answer your question though, I'm a big fan of the user Hans Was Yellow First stuff. He has a series of like 3 different builds that are they're not like thinking about Lego in a completely different way, like the typewriter or the other one I mentioned, but they are just unique like play sets that are set in his fantasy world that he came up with, and that he has a very specific aesthetic, and it looks really cool. So whenever he's gotten quite a few supports on a lot of things, but yeah, for various reasons hasn't made it through. But I think one of the windmill actually is on the Bricklink. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, and I can't remember the name of it, but there's essentially on Bricklink, there is, which is another website, there is a similar program to Lego Ideas where you can get them produced by Bricklink, which Lego now owns. So you could say it's like kind of an official Lego product in that sense as well. And yeah, his windmill set is on there, which I think is really nice. All of those, whenever they went up to 10,000, I was like, oh, if this goes through, I'd love to finish it. And then those are the ones where I was also like, I can already see that he's thought a lot about a lot of the different aspects. So I actually didn't think I would have to change that much either. So Yeah.
That's awesome. And I didn't know Lego bought Bricklink, so that's a fun fact that I learned today.
Yep.
Very cool.
So I see your bins behind you. I'm curious because I'm sure those of you that work at Lego have your own opinions on this, but what's the best organization method that you've found? It was like, I don't know, 10 years ago, I used to have my life collection of bricks in a giant red Christmas tree bin, storage bin. And it was all in one thing. And then it was like, I finally realized I'm going to do all these by color. And so I started by color and then by piece, like kind of rare piece. Like, what have you found? What do you use? I'm sure there's tons of blogs and people online. And of course, it depends on your space. But what's something that you learned about how to organize your own collection of pieces?
Yeah. So I'm more color oriented as well. So I would always, like, I never sorted as a kid. I think I tried 1 or 2 times and then it just never lasted. But then working at work, obviously we have a setup where it's by piece and color, and it's in an order where it's like you start with bricks and then you go to bricks special is what we call them. So like a brick with any other connector on the side of it or whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a logical step so that you can kind of, whenever you're in the design area and you have these big massive drawers and you're thinking of a piece, you know, okay, it's in that row in this drawer. So just to make it easy on myself, I just duplicated that. So I have it by brick, or by shape and by color for the most part. But I would say that there are certain things, like a lot of the smaller, like brackets and things, I found that it is nice to have them just by shape oftentimes, because when the shape of it is really what you want, you might not even care what color it is because it might be going on the inside of something. And you just find it quickly rather than like scraping around in a bin full of lime green just to find a tiny little piece.
Or if you did it by color, you'd have 12 versus I'll just have one for that piece type. And then all I need is one drawer for that because I don't have that many in my own personal collection anyway. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's fun. I could geek out talking about the organization method, but I won't bore everybody else.
Yeah. Anymore. I'm slowly working on labels though. That's
yes.
Talk about boring.
Our dad just got super excited.
I've gotten like, how many of these Alex stores do I have? 1, 2, 3. I've got like 14 of these cubes, and I think I finished the labels for 1 so far. It's just like, it's so tedious.
All in good time.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Denmark, because it amazes me that you went from like small town straight to Denmark, with a little bit of time in Columbus in between. So how long have you been in Denmark?
So I moved over here August 2013, so a little over 8 years now.
Okay, so you're pretty like comfortable and set and everything. So when you first got to Denmark, like, what did you think? Was there any kind of shock to the system?
Not too much. I think I'm not. I wouldn't describe myself as a geographically based person. Like, I never really felt that homesick when I left, which might sound like, I don't know, not so great, but
no, I get it.
I just I think it's also like the job was so exciting. It was hard not to be super excited every day to wake up and go to work. But it does help, like, at least in the atmosphere, like the weather, the climate is very similar. I would like, obviously the nights are much longer in the winter in Denmark, and that can have some drawbacks. Like, there's a lot of seasonal depression, which I haven't fortunately like succumbed to too much, but it is like around now is when we start to go to work and it's dark and you come back and it's dark, which I mean, I guess some people in the States might also have similar cases, but no, it's really good. there's a lot of bonuses. Like anything, there's pluses and minuses. But we bought a house just about a year ago for the first time, so
Cool.
putting down the roots.
So we talk a lot about food on this podcast. Are there any weird food things like, for example, we had somebody, I don't know if you know, Chance McGee. He does caricatures. He was a CCAD guy for a few years. Anyway, he's now in Germany, and he's like, they market foods over here like they're American, and they're not.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like
Yeah.
there's American flags emblazoned all over everything, and the Statue of Liberty over American popcorn, but it isn't salty or savory. It's all sweet. You can't get salty popcorn in Germany. Are there any weird things like that?
Yeah, they actually sell like chewy chocolate chip cookies at the barista at work that are made in the Netherlands, but they have like a highway sign and they say like American style. Like,
American style.
American style.
They're great. They're like a Subway cookie or something, but
anything that you can't get over there that you need us to ship you, like a care package?
Man, it's weird. Like some things get better as they go on. Like when we first moved we live in a small town called Vila, just like outside of Billund. And when we first got here, there wasn't a whole lot, but since then, like the Vila has been expanding, and they got like a street food, which was the best thing that happened, because it's like they had a few people move in that really knew what they were doing. Like, and everything is always kind of catered to the Danish taste. So there's like a Mexican burrito place, but they do use like traditional Mexican flavors, but it's definitely like leaning all the way. Like the Danes love like pickled onions, or pickled cabbage, whichever one it is. Which, yeah, things like that. Like potatoes is like a huge thing, but like just plain boiled potatoes, which I'm not a huge fan of. There's a lot of things that like, yeah, you have to find the good spots for food and then just kind of be faithful to those. I'm trying to think of another one that I had to get used to was liverpostei, which is like what do you call it? Like just a liver paste that they smear hot onto bread in the mornings. And it smells like cat food. It's not my favorite thing. And they love black licorice. Like it's like the flavor of the country almost.
We just talked about that in our Halloween episode because we were covering least favorite Halloween candies, and black licorice was in there.
Yeah, it's a huge Danish tradition, and they have all these varieties. Like they love extremely salty black licorice, which if you thought black licorice was bad on its own, make it super salty, and then it's just like, oh my gosh. Like I have had black licorice also that I did like, because sometimes they cover it in like chocolate powder and things like that. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of weird different foods, but we've been able to find some of our favorite places that we are very faithful to.
Yeah,
that's great.
I feel like you could take, and then you could also teach some culinary stuff. Like all right. I never liked licorice as a kid, but you did this thing, and that was actually pretty good. Now you guys take your boiled potatoes. Have you ever tried mashing these? Because let me tell you.
Oh yes. Or that's cutting them up and frying them.
Yeah.
Well, I think Americans and Europeans can massively underestimate the cultural diversity in one another's land, especially with Europe, how many countries are in a small area. And then for Europeans, how big the United States is and how varied it is, even by traveling 2 hours in any given direction. So I love hearing about some of those little cultural differences, because I think it's so much fun. Like you'd be hard pressed to sell liver paste to anybody in Central Ohio.
Yeah.
But when it's such a staple, it's so fascinating. And it's a lot of the travel shows too, right? You see people travel and they're trying food and unique stuff all over the world. And it's so interesting. So I love hearing about it. And how apparently Americans all have one kind of cookie, and that's what you can get at work every day. Just the one kind of cookie that we eat. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Another weird thing about food is that like people almost rarely like pick up their burgers or their hot dogs. Like they just always eat it with utensils, which I thought there might be a few people here and there that would do that, but I just thought it was so strange. Like but they also make them in a way that it's really hard. So I always take it as a challenge to like try and eat like an American and pick it up, even though they've like taken a sloppy Joe and then like poured gravy all over the top of the bun.
It's the George Costanza using a knife and fork with Snickers from Seinfeld, right? Yeah. You're just like baffled at anyone, but it's so much fun.
Yeah. So sometimes it's like a salad just dumped on a piece of bread with another piece like slightly angled on the side. Like that's a sandwich.
I love those little things and intricacies and nuances of things that you pick up. And so that's why I knew we had to ask that question. So as a part of your acclimating to Denmark, did you find a D&D community out there? I know you're a big D&D guy. Yes. We had one of our friends, James Taylor, way back in episode 17, where we talked about D&D, and a lot of your artwork is D&D related, whether you're doing cool little insignias or symbols of different things or designing characters. That's one of my favorite things of yours to look at, but I'm not a player myself. So tell us about that love.
Yeah. So I actually hadn't played before I came here. There's a guy named Callan who is kind of the grandfather of DMs here. And he had only started, I think maybe a year or two before he started us on it. But he basically convinced me on the bus home one day, like, oh, you should just give it a shot. Like, and I was really hesitant. I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I just got weird vibes about D&D growing up and stuff. Like, my parents didn't really think it was that great or whatever.
Yeah, we talked about that, like the satanic panic and how like D&D is how the devil gets in. And
yeah. But then the more I was thinking about it, the more he was like, I was asking a few questions like, oh, well, like, how do you come up with the characters? And as he was describing like the character creation aspect of it, I'm like, this is kind of what I like doing anyway for my paintings. Is like whenever I want to do a new painting, I think of, okay, what haven't I painted before? I want to do like, I've never done a dwarf. So let's do that. And what's a color scheme I've never done before? And then, so D&D just like added loads of extra detail layers on top of that process, which I think really helped me in coming up with better character designs, as well as like considering every single little aspect about it. To the point where now I'm a little bit sad because I don't really do like, I guess you could say like, I don't know, original stories anymore. It's always like a character that's plugging into one of my friends' campaigns. So I miss the really close original stuff, but yeah. And then ever since then, it's like, well, now I have the perfect excuse to draw characters like I always liked to before anyway.
That's so cool. And this book you made, by the way, is so cool.
Thanks.
Well, is that the pop-up book?
No, that's
that's something else. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, that's one thing I like to do. Like whenever I try something new is like put my own spin on it. So like you have the basic character sheet that's like an A4 size or letter size piece of paper. And then there's like 3 of those if you're a spellcaster as well. So like once everyone has all their character sheets spread on the table, it takes up a lot of room. So I didn't like that. So my idea was like, can I make something that's more compact and thin that will only take up just the part in front of me? So it's like the cramming all the information onto half the size. And like I said before, I love reductive design or whatever you want to call it. So like, how can I take all the information on a character sheet, put it on half the size, or spread it out in a way that is more functional? Sadly, I have since just converted to just using an iPad. I loved it for a while because it really felt like in the moment, but I don't know, the iPad, I was constantly Googling stuff on my phone that I didn't know. So
that's kind of what I mean when I was saying earlier about how like everything you do is cool. I remember Tyler Coey, he's big into BMWs and fixing them up. Of course, he bought this like awesome brick place in Kansas City, and he like restores and works on vehicles and motorcycles. Anyway, he had this like little button in his Beamer that wasn't doing anything. And so he took it out and he like painted it. And it's like a reference to like a turbo button in some movie. And I'm like, see, that's just like everything, like creative ways to just think of things differently and put your own spin on them. I love that you do that. It's cool. Big fan, man. Anything that you want to promote or talk about? How do people find you on social media? I know we've been clicking a lot through your Instagram. I know you've worked on a few board games and stuff. Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I pretty much only use Instagram these days. So I guess you'll have the link there somewhere.
Yep, Wes _Talbot on Instagram. Such cool stuff on there.
Someone took it without the underscore, so I had to do that. But yeah, as far as promotion, I don't have anything personally that I worked on or am working on. But yeah, my buddy Matty O'Neill did this the Heroes of Barcadia board game that I didn't like work on any of it, but I helped out a lot with like testing it essentially. We've been testing it for like the past couple of years. And yeah, he just had a really successful Kickstarter with it. And I think the backers should be getting their stuff. I think the goal is like March or something. But then after that, hopefully you'll be able to buy it on the Roll-A-Crit website. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Well, hey man, it has been a ton of fun getting to know you more. And I just thank you for thrilling us with your stories of what it's like to work at Lego, but also just as an artist and geek. I knew you would fit in really well with not only me, but my co-hosts and our listeners. So it's just been really fun. Please come back if you ever want to talk more. I'm sure we could deep dive a whole bunch more stuff, but it's been a blast talking with you. And one more question. Are you close enough with Brickmaster Amy that you could get her to follow us on Instagram?
She was actually my manager for a short period.
Oh, sweet. So that's a definite yes. Awesome.
All
Dylan's
right.
been trying to get her on the show.
Yeah, I owe her my last promotion. So
no, I'm teasing. I wouldn't put that on you. That was purely a joke, but seriously, if you can, that'd be great. So anyway, it's been fun, and thanks a ton, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Wes.